Welcome to the Global Women in Cardiology Early Career Essay Competition webinar. We, the Global WIC team, are excited to have all of you join us today for this competition. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here. As we all know, COVID-19 has caused an unprecedented disruption in all our lives, be it in our personal lives or in the clinical care we give our patients. Women especially have been known to be hit more by the pandemic when it comes to balancing their personal lives, their homes, childcare, research productivity, or academic promotions. Women have been affected in all these spheres of their lives. The purpose of having this essay competition was to highlight the unique challenges that we all face and share our own stories and hopefully learn from each other and maybe pave the way for solutions as we navigate through this pandemic. About the Global WIC Early Career team, we came together as a group earlier this year with the purpose of providing support and mentoring and providing resources to trainees and early career women across the world. The core team consists of 6 early career women and trainees from 6 continents. We have Sarah Burgos from the UK, Louise Segan from Australia, Aisha Kader from Asia, Nafisa El Samani from Africa, Paula Morejon from South America, and myself from the United States. About me, my name is Sabida Karavat. I am an interventional cardiology trainee at the University of Vermont, and I will be doing my structural heart disease training next year at Vanderbilt. I am serving on the American College of Cardiology Interventional Leadership Council and the Society for Cardiovascular Angiography and Imaging, which is the SCI Structural Heart Disease Council. I have special interest in clinical and outcomes-based research in coronary interventions, structural heart, as well as in disparity-based research in cardiovascular care. Let me now have my fantastic powerhouse team introduce themselves to you. First off, I'll ask Louise Segan from Australia to talk to you and introduce herself.
Thank you, Sabida. My name's Louise. I'm a cardiologist from Melbourne, Australia, and I'm embarking on a PhD in electrophysiology and heart failure in 2021. I'm very excited to be part of the Women in Cardiology Global Early Careers group because I've been a part of a local group for over a year, and it's great to network with other international women who are at a similar career stage and navigating similar as well as region-specific differences. I'm interested in looking at bridging the gap between electrophysiology and heart failure management and starting locally, but hopefully having some international impact. So thank you very much for having me here today.
Hi, I'm Sarah Burgos. I'm originally from Germany, but I'm a cardiology trainee in the United Kingdom. I'm also the British Junior Cardiologists Association Women in Cardiology representative. I'm very excited that after a very successful case competition, we are now having an essay competition with the rest of the women in cardiology across the globe. My subspecialty interest is heart failure and imaging, and I'm hoping to do a PhD in the same in the next coming years. I'm very excited to meet you all. I'm looking forward to interesting essay competition.
Hi everyone, this is Aisha Kader. I'm originally Sri Lankan, but I'm currently a cardiologist based in Dhaka, Bangladesh, with an interest in interventional cardiology. I'm also a part-time master's studying in clinical trials at the University of Oxford. I have research interests in acute coronary syndromes and outcomes research. And I'm especially happy to meet you all today and excited to hear your stories pertaining to COVID and women in cardiology.
Hi, I am Nafisa Al Samani from Sudan. I am representing Africa in this group. I have a special interest in cardiac imaging and pulmonary hypertension and cardiac academia. Thank you for being in our webinar and hope it will be a grateful day.
We are all excited to welcome our judges. We have an esteemed panel of judges from 4 different continents. They are leaders and stalwarts in their respective subspecialties But even more exciting is the fact they are such strong champions and advocates for women in cardiology world over. Let me first ask Dr. Janet Hahn from the United States to introduce herself.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Janet Hahn, and I'm an associate professor of medicine at the University of California in Los Angeles, and I work mostly at the VA hospital here in Los Angeles, where I practice as a cardiac electrophysiologist. I'm active in both the Heart Rhythm Society and the American College of Cardiology, and I have special interest in telehealth, digital health, wearables, and the growing digital divide. And I'm very grateful for the invitation and the opportunity to participate in today's program, because as you know, there is not only a dearth of women in STEM, but there's a dearth of women in cardiology in general. And it's important to identify women who are interested in cardiology early in their careers and give them really the encouragement and the role modeling that they need to help them understand that women can be successful and have a balanced career and balanced life in a high stakes career. And I also feel strongly that women in cardiology should be given a voice early in their careers, and that both women and men should help amplify their voice so that it can be heard and perpetuated. And lastly, I feel that sponsorship and mentorship and amplification shouldn't really end right after early career, but it really should continue well into mid and late career so that we don't continue to lose women through the leaky pipeline. So thank you for having me here today.
Thank you for joining us. Next up, we have Dr. Sonya Burgess.
Good morning and hello to everyone. My name is Dr. Sonya Burgess. I'd like to start by thanking you all for organizing this amazing conference and to thank everyone for being here today. I'm an interventional cardiologist, I'm an academic cardiologist, and I'm a clinical cardiologist in Sydney. I've just submitted my PhD on incomplete revascularization in STEMI. I'm the first New Zealand woman to become an interventional cardiologist, but I practice in Australia where I'm one of 17 women. This prompted us to write a number of papers, including published papers in JACC and Circulation, JAMA Cardiology, and we've just submitted another one as part of the Women in Interventional Cardiology group, WIC, and I'm a founding member of the WIC New Zealand and Australia group. I've got 2 children. I'm married to a doctor, so I am managing childcare and worries about how to keep everyone safe. And I was particularly at the beginning of the year. My research interests are in incomplete revascularization, in STEMI, in multi-vessel disease, but also in differences in ischemic heart disease for women and workforce disparity, and more importantly, how we can make positive change through workforce diversity generally. I'm so delighted that we're all coming together to do this. I think it's critical. I think the strength we get from other women during these troubling times is so important. And the things that we find we have in common will give us all strength to push through what I hope is the last bit of this horrible pandemic. I'd like to thank you all, and thank you for describing me and the rest of the team as champions. That gives me strength. I think together we can go anywhere we want to, and I'm really delighted to be part of this.
Thank you, Dr. Burgess. Next up, we have Dr. Liesl Zuhlke from Africa.
Greetings to all of you watching. I'm Liesl Zuhlke. I'm a pediatric cardiologist based in the beautiful city of Cape Town in South Africa. I am a pediatric cardiologist, as I've said. I work at a children's hospital, but I also work in grown-up congenital heart disease at Groote Schuur Hospital, which some of you may know as being the hospital where the first heart transplant was performed just over 50 years ago. I am one of the few women that are professors of cardiology in the country, one of only 3, the only pediatric cardiologist, full professor in the country. And I also lead a children's heart disease research unit based at my hospital. It has been a real pleasure being part of this process, very exciting. The idea in the first place, and it's been a real pleasure to read through these wonderful, wonderful essays and see that we have all been through really difficult times over the last year. But as we've heard before, and as we'll hear today on this webinar, how we can use these as opportunities for growth and development and support. Personally, I'm married. I have my husband is a plastic surgeon, and I have two sons, 15 and 20. My 20-year-old son is at medical school. And so it has been a busy time for us all this year, navigating surgery, navigating medical school, high school, online, as well as remote research projects. My research interest is in issues affecting children with heart disease or heart disease acquired in childhood, and in particular, heart disease that are of particular relevance in Africa. And I did my PhD on rheumatic heart disease, a disease of poverty. And of importance with some of these diseases is how differently we are affected by it based on our gender and based on the area of the world that we live in. And so those are very important things to me to try and use our research and our clinical work to address inequalities across the globe. So I really am very appreciative of this opportunity. I would like to congratulate our finalists on their amazing essays and their insights. And let's use this opportunity not only to break the glass ceilings, but to strengthen the rungs of the ladder and to strengthen each other as we go forward. So thank you very much again for the opportunity.
Thank you to all of you. You've inspired each and every one of us here today. And I'm sure that the stories we hear today will leave us thinking about them once we finish. Presenting to you our finalists. First up, we have Dr. Nandita Kazi from the UK talking to us about her essay, A Change of Heart.
Hello, my name is Nandita Kaza. I'm originally from India and I grew up in Switzerland, and I'm now working in London in the United Kingdom with the NHS, Imperial College Healthcare NHS Trust. I'm a FY3 doctor, so for those of you not from the UK, that's about 2 years after medical school. I'm applying to internal medicine training this year, and I hope to apply to cardiology training in a couple of years' time. And my essay is entitled A Change of Heart. The pandemic brought on an onslaught of changes to all of our lives, and yet I could never have imagined the change it would bring about in mine. Set upon pursuing pediatrics since even before I applied to medical school, I approached my cardiology foundation rotation the same way I had with any other job, a willingness to learn and yet a comforting knowledge that it would be one of my last experiences in adult medicine before pursuing the career of my dreams. I saw my first COVID positive patient in mid-March on what was intended to be my last shift, and I remember leaving the hospital with some regret that I hadn't had the chance to explore the specialty further. But a week later, I was back on the unit, covering a night shift for a self-isolating colleague, with the news that trainees across the country wouldn't be rotating posts, and I found myself with a further 4 months of cardiology to contend with. I liken stepping into the lab to walking onto stage accidentally for the first time during a well-rehearsed performance occurring in an unfamiliar place. There's a striking trepidation that overcomes you as you try and delineate an acceptable place for yourself amidst a well-orchestrated choreography. Beyond the layers of lead and fluoroscopy, the lab often seemed impermeable, and the knowledge in its inner sanctum esoteric. All experiences are good experiences, one of my senior colleagues once said to me. Easy for him to say, I thought cynically, convinced he had never had to worry about his procedural unfamiliarity, doubted his clinical capabilities, or questioned his academic potential. I was probably wrong, and he had probably felt the same way at least once in his career, but it was difficult to imagine. I found myself both fascinated and frightened, enthralled by the endless possibilities in this career I had never considered, and yet acutely fearful of the failures I might encounter along the way. And this is where mentorship came into the picture. Mentorship is one of the key tenets of medical education, and yet it's one of the first to be stripped of attention during a time of crisis. With all the competing clinical priorities, it is hard to always be thinking about how you might inspire or support a junior colleague in parallel. And yet, some of my most valued moments of mentorship have occurred on the most chaotic of days in the care of complex patients. So much of success in medicine is attributed to knowledge and confidence. And yet somehow the COVID-19 pandemic somehow created an altered playing field where the demarcated hierarchy of roles was slightly blurred. The elusive cloak of confidence which swayed senior doctors no longer seemed so prominent. For many of his junior trainees, we saw our seniors worried, afraid, and uncertain for the very first time. This was both humanizing and humbling. There's an insidious loneliness which plagues medical professionals across specialties, in that the admission of fear is viewed as a sign of weakness. However, the sheer disquiet triggered by the pandemic somehow alleviated this. We found ourselves amidst colleagues of all grades as we attempted to reckon with the far-reaching implications of this new disease, which had stolen both lives and livelihoods across the planet. The lab slowly transformed into an oasis of learning and comfort, a place to congregate with colleagues and share experiences of diagnoses missed and mistakes made. What was truly novel about this trajectory of learning was that we were amassing information in real time, alongside colleagues who had decades of experience more than us. Ironically, in a time of social distancing, I had never felt closer to the people I worked alongside. I wish I could say I was bold enough to have sought out my first experience of performing a scan, but I would be dishonest if I did. Instead, I waited for the opportunity to present itself in the form of a magnanimous registrar who was happy to wait patiently, while I positioned myself precariously at the patient's bedside, fumbled tentatively with the probe, only to finally take a grainy and off-axis picture, which probably left us with little more information than we had before even entering the room. The gesture was small and yet felt monumental. I felt empowered every time I picked up the probe, and I realized that learning to scan gave me a scintillating yet tangible glance into what it could feel like to be a cardiologist. As my views became more centered, so did my outlook on cardiology training and my potential role within it. I was in a place of immense privilege to have the support that I did, and I hope that my peers were also benefiting from the same net of mentorship the pandemic had cast across the medical community. In medicine, quitting is often equated to failure, and while training has become less rigid over the years, I still felt tinges of stigma enshrouding me as I set about enacting my decision to resign on only the second day of the pediatrics job I'd coveted for so long. Nonetheless, the decision to step away from a career which I thought I'd always wanted and towards one which held so many unknown factors was so liberating that I knew it had to be the right decision for me. As I made my decision, I wondered how many other women had held themselves back from an opportunity they were afraid of, simply because they weren't fortunate enough to have the support that I did along the way. Gender bias is reported in cardiology departments across the globe, and while I was extremely grateful to have nothing short of excellent and dedicated mentorship at my own place of work, I was acutely aware this might not be the case at other stages of my career. It was here that I realized that while it is imperative we continue to widen access to cardiology training for women, it's paramount that we don't allow this wider systemic mission to dampen the aspirations of early career doctors. Viewing female trainees not as women aspiring to break into the male-dominated world of cardiology, but very simply as future cardiologists is the first step towards this. Thank you.
Thank you, Nandita, for the amazing presentation. You left all of us mesmerized. I will now have Dr. Janet Khan ask you a question about your presentation.
So Nandita, that was a lovely essay. I really enjoyed reading it. I could identify with you because I wanted to be an ophthalmologist. And after 3 months in my ophthalmology residency, I decided cardiology was the right choice. So I thank you for being brave enough to change your course of your life. So can you talk a little bit about that? So I liked that you talked about fear and fear of the unfamiliar. There's a saying that is famous that says, life begins at the end of your comfort zone. So we know that women are less likely than men to accept a new job or position or a lecture or a new challenge without feeling 100% prepared. So what advice do you have for other WIC and other early career WIC who are faced sort of with this fear of unfamiliarity?
Thanks so much for your kind words. It's really very inspiring to say that. I guess my advice, I'm probably at a quite early stage of my career to be giving advice to other people. But I think from my own experiences, what I would say is that for all medical professionals, not just in cardiology, is that the more we normalize fear and sort of try and acknowledge it instead of avoiding it, I think that's quite instrumental to creating a very supportive learning environment. I was really lucky to have mentors who told me that it was okay to be afraid and that who kind of said it out loud. And that's something that's quite rare in medicine, I think, where we have this illusion that we're always meant to be perfect and know everything and always have all the answers. And I think the pandemic really put that into perspective, the fact that none of us knew the answer. This was something that was changing every single day. And suddenly even, you know, the head of the department, the government, everybody was admitting that they were a bit scared and uncertain about what would happen. So I think channeling that is really important. It's important to remember that, you know, we got through this pandemic with that fear and everything was, you know, would turn out all right in the end. So I think knowing that even if you are scared, it's okay to admit it, and you should really embrace the fear and use it to kind of drive you further and get you to seek the questions and the answers that you're looking for, as opposed to holding yourselves back from the opportunities because of it.
Absolutely. That's a great answer. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We have Dr. Sheila Klassen from the United States. She will be presenting her essay, Transition to Practice as a Woman in Cardiology During the Coronavirus 2019 Pandemic. Over to you, Sheila.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation. My name is Sheila Klassen. I'm a newly minted adult community cardiologist, actually in rural Canada, with a specialty in structural heart disease and echocardiography. I also work in global health and healthcare delivery within the Department of Global Health and Social Medicine at Harvard Medical School, with a focus on heart failure care delivery in Africa. COVID-19 caught me at the transition point between fellowship and practice. After the completion of my clinical training in the United States last year in 2019, I decided to pursue an additional year of a global health fellowship. I heard the news about COVID-19 in mid-February when traveling from Rwanda back to Boston, where I was living at the time. And probably like many of you, I listened to the news with the air of someone far removed from the initial outbreaks, at least until it hit the West Coast of the United States. Even then, it didn't bother me to travel to Canada, where I covered a cardiology practice intermittently throughout fellowship. But 1 week into my locum in mid-March, as case counts ratcheted out of control globally, I realized I didn't feel safe traveling home to Boston. And several days after that, the Canada-US border closed. This leads me to my first lesson learned of the pandemic: be flexible and pivot. I suspect that many WIC are like me, organized planners, obsessively hardworking, a little bit neurotic. Finding myself in temporary housing in Canada with upcoming fellowship time in Liberia canceled and the world in chaos was challenging. It took me 4 weeks to come to terms with the fact that I would not be completing my global health fellowship in the way that I'd planned. I was not returning to my US apartment. At the same time, I felt a professional obligation to assist with the pandemic response locally, and I needed to turn the sudden gap at the end of fellowship into a career move. Over the subsequent months, I signed a half-time clinical appointment in Canada, and my global health program director and I rolled my fellowship into an academic faculty position. The end of my training and my transition to practice happened in the most unconventional and underwhelming way. There are always circumstances which force us to alter our paths, and times in our careers where we must take that proverbial deep breath, look at our options, and be willing to take that 90-degree turn. This ability to pivot early, to pivot well, is an asset. The second lesson, for which I've gained enormous appreciation over this past year, is to be creative with opportunity. We've all had to find new and virtual ways of going about our lives. I interviewed for my job virtually, and this is the first time I've ever Zoomed into a friend's wedding. I was even able to deepen friendships with those far away as we struggled through this period of isolation together. In my global health work, we spent this time of restricted travel exploring online training platforms for the healthcare providers that we work with in Africa, and adapting our in-person heart failure training material into virtual learning tools, which will make our training richer and more easily scaled once we're able to rejoin our partners. We are painfully aware that this pandemic has brought to light all the faults and disparities of our societies, and the struggle of women cardiologists is no exception. The specific barriers to WIC during COVID-19 include things like caregiver obligations, difficulty maintaining academic output, and ill-fitting PPE, among other things. And this brings me to my last lesson, which is one that I cannot emphasize enough. Make use of your supports and be sure to support others. During this challenging time, our strength is each other. My fellowship to career transition during the pandemic would not have been possible without colleagues and mentors, both women and men, who've put their shoulder behind my transition despite their own heightened stress and competing priorities. Over the years, they've built in me the resilience and skills needed to transition to independent practice in relative isolation during a pandemic. They continue to be readily available to discuss challenging cases and to answer my questions with honesty and humor. I recommend to my fellow women cardiologists, particularly those in training and in early career, to seek out these mentors and surround yourself with those who support you. And over the last 6 months and year, I've tried to pay this mentorship forward to other trainees. We early career WIC stand on the shoulders of exceptional women who've come before us, and we must continue to pave the way for women in training who will someday be in our position. Together, even in the face of a global pandemic, we can help each other pivot to meet change, be creative with opportunity, and strive together for more gender equity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sheila, for such an eloquent presentation. I'm going to ask Dr. Sonya Burgess to ask you a question regarding your presentation.
Thank you so much, Sheila. Those messages you gave are so powerful and so universal. Thanks for taking the time to put all that together. And I want to compliment you on finding a way to reframe all of the challenges of 2020 into opportunity. I think that's amazing, and it's something that makes this year bearable for all of us. You're incredible. You've worked in 3 different countries. You've worked in Rwanda, you've worked in the States, and you've worked in Canada. If we're talking about strengths, can you talk a little bit about the strengths of each country and what sets each country up for success and positive solutions for the pandemic in each of these countries?
Sure. I'll start with Canada, which is where I have most experience working in pandemic during COVID. And especially in early days, I think the sense of community and the sense of solidarity was what held us together in terms of being able to self-isolate and encouraging others to self-isolate. And I think that respect of community and of each other really did help with pandemic control. In the United States, really the strength has been in research and has been in academics, and that's always been a real strength of the United States. And they've been working so hard in doing all these drug trials and reviewing papers for pandemic related publications. And I think that a lot of our literature has come out of journals and research groups in the States. And I think that we've all benefited from that. And in Rwanda, I've had the opportunity to talk to partners in Rwanda throughout the year this year. And again, their sense of community in keeping each other accountable to self-isolation, to temperature checks, to being very respectful of public health guidelines has really kept their numbers under great control. They're very diligent about their restrictions, and they don't see it as a burden. They see it as a way of helping each other out. And that's just has been really incredible to see this year.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next up, we have Saima Karim from the United States, and who will be presenting her essay, The Impact of COVID-19 on Early Career Women. Saima?
My name is Saima Karim. I'm an electrophysiologist. I'm based out of Cleveland. I work at Metro Health Medical Center, which is affiliated with CASE. And we are actually getting hit with COVID-19 now as opposed to before for all the people that went through the first surge because of a lot of restrictions that were there before. So I'm going to start sharing my essay, and I'm going to start with the PowerPoint slide, but I wanted to thank all the judges and the panelists and all the organizers for this to begin with. So my essay is called The Impact of COVID-19 on Early Career Female Physicians. And the first thing I wanted to say was that as we already know as healthcare workers, there's definitely has been an increase of the workload that has been placed on physicians worldwide. And potentially the people that are most affected are working mothers, especially female physicians or healthcare workers that have children have been specifically very much affected because of the lack of equilibrium that existed before between home and work life and potential amalgamation of responsibilities. And there's actually been a lot of research about this, about more than 60% of the responsibilities at home falling on women, and that has actually worsened during the pandemic with things like school closing, social isolation, not just at the level of the adults, but also at the level of the children, and also the decrease in childcare resources that suddenly occurred because of the shutdown of schools in the United States. And this has been a trying time for many of us, but there has been a significant deluge of expansion of resources as well. And some of the positive things that have come out from this include telemedicine. We have benefited tremendously from the rapid evolvement of telemedicine that has occurred since the pandemic started. We are able to provide care for a lot of patients without putting themselves or their families at risk. So that is something that we have gained from this, and hopefully something that continues well after the pandemic. I think one of the other positive things that has occurred is digital connectivity. And what I mean by that is social media has become more important than ever for connectivity and also for research opportunities to get along and form research groups, whether it's looking at COVID-19 or other issues. I think that has actually expanded significantly during the pandemic. Also, opportunities for career advancements, such as presentations. This being an example, this has opened a lot of doors with Zoom meetings, WebEx meetings, and a lot of other opportunities that initially were more limited due to lack of time. So a lot of these presentations that are occurring virtually are more encompassing and definitely more readily available. One of the things that even though this has not been an entirely positive experience with immeasurable losses of life and social distancing has definitely created a lot of strain, one of the things that I think we have gained is a surgical precision in how we manage our time. And that's something that even though we were reasonably good at before, as women in cardiology, we've become actually a bit more skilled at that than before. And part of it is also allocation of labor, things that we were potentially doing before out of necessity entirely. At least for me, I have started allocating some of the household responsibilities that I wasn't doing before. And I, at this point, don't even know why we were doing a lot of the things that we were doing before that were potentially stressful and could have been allocated. One of the other things that hopefully will come out of this is expansion of our skill set in medicine and beyond. So some of the things within medicine are telemedicine, the knowledge that's gained by COVID-19, the very rapid and remarkable development of vaccines, but the beyond portion of it is potential involvement of physicians in healthcare management roles. And the reason may be things like PPE, the response to the pandemic across the globe, and hopefully it creates more physician leaders that were present, that will be present in the future than have been present in the past. And one of the things that I think this pandemic has done is brought out our humanity and the infallibility of physicians in this pandemic. We've all been touched by it, and it's affected us in many, many ways, whether it's our time, whether it's the imminent sense of potential contraction of COVID-19 as we take care of the patients, or whether it's just inability. There's actually a lot of papers about inability to sleep and insomnia that has occurred in healthcare providers. So I think it's very important to, in this format, still maintain things that are important for your mental health and your resilience, and to set limitations to the commitments that we have that potentially could limit how productive we are and how healthy we are during this. Part of it is continuing to do things we enjoy outside of medicine, or learning to do something we do outside of medicine. One of the things for me that I have started doing, which is very unusual, is I've started building a lot of things. So I've built quite a few tables and chairs and workspaces within my own home. And this is something that I wasn't doing before, and I'm actually very good with tools. So this is something that I have learned, and it's actually a big stress reliever for me. One of the other things that I just wanted to end with is that as women in cardiology, being a small subgroup within a bigger group, I think it's very important to find your niche, and very important to find a group of friends that you can rely on. I saw the paper very recently in Jack Case reports about the raft of otters, and I found it to be fascinating because I think a lot of us were already doing this, where we were relying on each other for ideas, for amplification of our voices, and for discussing things that we weren't able to with others. So the social networking aspect of it has helped, but I think it's also very important to stay rooted with the friends that we do have. And I think all in all, even though it has been a challenging time, hopefully some of the positive aspects of this that have come out, hopefully will stay with us and continue to expand in the future. So I wanted to thank you all for listening to me, and thank you for inviting me to this forum. And thank you to everyone that's present today.
Thank you, Saima. That was a great presentation. I'm going to ask Dr. Liesl Zuhlke to ask you a question.
Yes, Saima, thank you so much for that presentation, and I so enjoyed reading your essay, and hopefully we'll all get to see what some of your workbenches and furniture looks like. I think it's wonderful to have an outlet, as you say, especially during this time. One of the things that you didn't mention in your presentation, and you obviously mentioned and allude to it in your essay, is the fact that you're a mum of young children. And I remember during different times in my career when my husband and I were working in different parts of, at the time, of the world, and I was a single mum, that was a very challenging time for me. And I also, you alluded to this in your presentation, the challenge and the opportunity growth of how to manage one's time. And I wonder if you could expand maybe on those two elements a little bit, for in particular, the WICs that are watching today that are also mothers of young children trying to manage their time better.
Yes, thank you for the question. I think that's a very important question, because when I was in training, one of the questions I had is, when is the right time to start a family? And one of the very wise attendings, female attendings that was a good mentor to me, said, there's never a good time to start a family. It just happens. If you want to start a family, you start a family, because there's no good time. So at this point, I can tell you I'm a single mom of a kindergartner who's very active, and he's really suffering from being socially isolated because he's doing online schooling. And I think one of the things that goes into this is the amount of work you have to put in, even before the pandemic, to manage every single aspect of the life of a child, as long as, you know, and yourself. That goes on with the education, with meal preparation, with, you know, things around the house. And I think before the pandemic, even though I think I was doing a lot, when the pandemic started, I started doing this exponentially more. And some of the people that I could not have done without, that are outside of my raft of fathers, is actually my parents. They are here in Cleveland, and they were able to, you know, watch my son during the pandemic till the new school year started, and I was able to hire someone for all of this. When I did hire someone to help me with the childcare needs and the schooling and the meal prep and everything, I can tell you, I don't know why I did it by myself before. And I think one of the things I learned was to allocate, which a lot of things which I was doing before by myself. And even though as an academic physician, you know, the salary portion of it, definitely, you know, you do pay a lot for allocation of resources, but I think it's essential for your own sanity, especially in times like the pandemic. And one of the other reasons has been because I have been taking care of COVID patients. And when I come home, I don't want to bring everything to my parents who are elderly. So the fact that I've been able to find childcare and have not been dependent on my parents and have not been exposing them to things I bring at home has been a blessing during this time. And it came out of necessity, but I could tell you at this point, I don't know why I took the world upon myself before all of this. And it is difficult. It is difficult. And I think managing time is something I've done very well for a long time. But one of the things I realize I'm doing too much of is during the pandemic, I realized that I'm doing potentially too much between the hours of midnight and 4 a.m., which is all the research that I do, or a majority of the research that I do. So I think one of the things I've realized is, you know, it's very important to slow down and do other things that I enjoy and put limitations on things. And put limitations on how much work you do outside of your work life for your work life, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And those are great sets of advice also for all the people listening in. Thank you so much.
I would now like to introduce you to the last member of our global WIC early career team, Paula Morejon from South America.
Hi everybody, my name is Paola Morejon. I am Ecuadorian, but I did my training in cardiology in Argentina. I especially interested in advanced heart failure, mechanical circulatory support, and heart transplant. So welcome to this great day.
Thanks, Paula. Let's welcome Dr. Ashok Seth from India. He is a pioneer in the subspecialty of interventional cardiology, but more importantly is his deep commitment to the cause of women in cardiology. Dr. Seth, if you could say a few words, please.
Sure. So I think let me start off by introducing myself. My name is Dr. Ashok Seth. I'm the chairman of the Fortis Escorts Heart Institute, a premier leading institute of the Asia Pacific region. Also, I'm an adjunct professor of cardiology to the National Board of Examinations of Training in Cardiology, as well as the Aligarh Muslim University Medical School. I'm the present president of the Asia Pacific Society of Interventional Cardiology, the past president of the Cardiological Society of India, and the past vice president of the Asia Pacific Society of Cardiology. And I was also on the board of trustees of the SCAI and received the Master in Interventional Cardiology, the MSCAI, of the Society of Cardiovascular Angiography and Interventions, and I'm the present ambassador of SCAI to India. I course director 5 interventional cardiology meetings in the Asia Pacific region, including the AICT Asia PCR, the CHIP CTO India, the India Valves, the India Live, and the Imaging and Physiology India meeting. So I was asked as to why am I associated with, firstly, being a judge on this essay competition, and the Women in Cardiology Earlier Career Group. And I thought this was very fascinating. The fact that I always have been very close to the facts of women in cardiology, the cause of women in cardiology, and the movement of establishing a place for women in cardiology, especially the hardships and the glass ceilings faced by the women in cardiology, and the fact that this young career group is looking for motivation, mentorship, and charting a new path ahead. And believe you me, when I actually met you all and read about you all, and when Dr. Carter informed me about you all, I was more motivated. You were looking for motivation. I was motivated by you all. I said, this is the true spirit of the youth, which is charting out fresh footsteps for other youth of cardiology, of women in cardiology to follow, to create a path, and to take it forwards amongst all the challenges that exist for women in cardiology, all the balancing acts that have to be done. But yet, there is a place, there is a space, and there's a carrier. And I believe in the fact that all of you are going to make a difference in cardiology and difference to the world the way we look forwards to it. And then, of course, there are challenges which are regional, and many of you come from countries where it's been very difficult to move forwards. And I think that you are an inspiration, and that's why I'm with you. I'm sitting with you because you are inspirational to a lot of young women out there, but you're inspiration to a lot of men, and you're inspirational to a lot of granddads as well. So look forward to this essay competition, look forward to being associated with you for some times to come.
Thank you, Dr. Seth, for motivating all of us today and for being such a strong he for she. I'd now like to ask our next presenter, Lucrecia Burgos from Argentina, to present her essay, Adapting to the COVID-19 Pandemic for Professional Development in Cardiology. Lucrecia?
Thank you very much, Savita, for the presentation, and Dr. Seth for that great introduction. In Argentina, from March to November, the lockdown was declared. It was the never-ending quarantine and the longest lockdown in the world. The high-risk group for COVID had to remain at home, and not so long ago, I was diagnosed with a neurologic disease, which why I'm taking immunosuppressive drugs So I went from working in the ICU with critical care patients and doing the ultrasound fellowship to work from my home every day in front of a computer. But with the same patient to take care of, the same desire to help, and with a lot of energy and the need to contribute to the current situation, with the vulnerability and the feeling of not being strong enough to be on the front line. So in front of this situation, I had to personally and professionally adapt. I did it hand in hand with technology and telemedicine. From my home, I started to collaborate with different international cardiology societies, such as the World Heart Federation or the Inter-American Society of Cardiology, by making summaries about relevant evidence about COVID-19 and cardiovascular diseases. I'm also part of the mentoring program called Emerging Leaders, which is a great program to collaborate with different colleagues all over the world. I'm also in charge of the resident training, the activity which I enjoy the most. I'm also felt morally obligated to contribute to the research of my center, given that all the physicians were tirelessly working every day in front line against COVID. So I published more than 20 articles related to COVID and cardiovascular diseases this year. I work every week in the scientific committee of the center, and I also got the award for best researcher. We work every day in 3 main activities in the big telemedicine project that I'm going to talk a little bit in these slides. Regarding the virtual visits, we publish our experience, the telehealth in heart failure care during COVID-19 pandemic lockdown in Argentina. We transform our heart failure unit from in-person outpatient visits to a largely virtual practice in response to COVID-19 pandemic lockdown. We make more than 400 virtual visits in March to June period, and I had a wide daily schedule available to make the virtual visits. They were feasible, presented high acceptability, and the overall experience was really positive. We found no difference regarding the requirement of diagnostic studies, in-person medical evaluation, and hospitalization between before and after COVID period. And we make final recommendations to those centers that are about to start to use this modality in these patients, to like a few tips. To respond to patients with acute cardiovascular diseases during the lockdown, I had the idea and co-lead the development and implementation of a cardiovascular emergency telephone line at 24/7, with the aim of improving healthcare access for patients that require urgent medical attention. In that period, with the first 2 months, we received almost 200 emergency calls. The 35% require evaluation in the emergency department, and the 20% of them require hospitalization, and the main diagnosis was acute coronary syndromes. This measure, this idea could be useful in countries still fighting COVID-19, such as North and South America, but also in those countries that are still going through the second wave. Finally, we are developing the first telemonitoring system and self-care app for heart failure patients in Argentina. With a lot of team effort in our overtime in unprotected hours without funding, we could do it, and we are about to start the pilot intervention to test feasibility, acceptability, and preliminary efficacy. Finally, as learning points, I can say that extreme adverse situations, such as mandatory and strict isolation for more than half a year, require adaptation and resilience in order to continue with healthcare, professional, and social life. The impossibility of being able to work on the front line of care against COVID-19 generated an adaptation in the way of providing healthcare. The pandemic accelerated the implementation of technology and the use of telemedicine, especially in low and middle income countries such as Argentina. Telemedicine, now we know, is an invaluable resource, absolutely necessary. This is a small sample of my country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lucrecia, firstly for your presentation and for sharing with us how you're taking care of your patients out there in beautiful Argentina. I would now like to ask Dr. Seth to ask you a question about your essay.
So Dr. Lucrecia, I was just saying that I think you really presented very nicely that during the lockdown, where you had to stay at home while your colleagues were fighting the COVID-19 on the ground, that you still made use of technology in an innovative manner to continue to take care of your patients and to contribute to the healthcare of your country. I must say that Argentina is a very beautiful country, and you showed some glimpses of it. It's one of the countries which I haven't visited, and I would love to visit it. It's one of the few countries which I've always wanted to visit, and I'm probably going to be there in the next couple of years as the world opens up. Let me just ask you this. You had innovative use of technology to start taking care of your patients. As we open up and as the COVID fades away, and let's assume that a year later or 2 years later, everything was back to normal, would you get back to the same way of functioning of a face-to-face interaction as you were doing before for your heart failure transplant patients? Or would you adapt many of the learnings of now and say whatever we were doing in the past was such lack of efficiency, such a waste of time, I could do 10 times more work with what I've learned in this last 6 months? How would you adapt the present to the future? What you did was that you tried to change the past to the present because you're forced to do so. Are there changes that you want to make in the future when the world comes back to normal?
Thank you very much for your question. It's really interesting. I think we learn certain abilities on use of technology, and we already have the structure. So if we have the structure, we have to use it. Right now, we are using like a mixed agenda, a mixed method, a mixed in-person and virtual visits. So it's really useful, especially with large countries with certain specialties concentrated in large cities. So we can overcome geographic barriers to access to better specialists or better healthcare. So I think this is going to be very interesting in Argentina. We know that we're going through a second wave in a few months. So I think that we have to start with this all over again, with the telephone to respond to cardiovascular diseases. We have to pull out different strategies to do not disattend cardiovascular diseases with the second wave. So I think we are going to use all these strategies again. The telephone, the emergency line, it was a great idea to try to respond to emergency 24/7. The virtual visits to continue the care with chronic diseases. I think right now it's kind of mixed, but in the future with different pandemics or different waves, we are going to use it again. So we have to be ready, and I think these kind of measures could inspire to improve these kind of strategies. So we are.
So do you believe that this would be the normal way to function in the future when the world returns to normal? Some of the learnings of the last 6 months could help you to function more efficiently?
We are never going to be normal again. Our country is going through a large sanitary crisis. So I think we have to adapt to the new situation with this kind of strategies.
One more question to you, and I think I'm just entitled to a couple of questions. In the changes that have happened during the COVID times, what do you think have been the advantages for women in cardiology? I don't want to talk about the disadvantages. I want to talk to you. Have you seen any advantages in women in cardiology in the circumstances which have occurred over the last 9 months of COVID times?
Yes, I think the main advantages was we could assist to different scientific activities that we could not attend in the past. The US Congress this year had the record of women attendees. It wasn't because we were interested, because we have families, we have children, we have another kind of family or obligations. So this kind of virtual mode could facilitate us to attend to different activities that otherwise we couldn't make it. to 30 to 45 or 50%. So I think this is the main advantages for us during the pandemic.
And you did a lot of good research as well, which again was very useful, wasn't it? You contributed tremendously to research from what I read.
I felt morally obligated, but I think this was my problem. And nobody obligated me to do it, but I wanted to help.
Right. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you, Lucrecia and Dr. Seth. We will now have our last presenter for the day, Zainab Dakhil. She's here from Iraq, talking to us about challenges faced and lessons learned in the COVID-19 era.
Thanks for introducing me, and thanks for the opportunity to talk about my subject, which is faced challenges and learned lessons in COVID-19 era, a female cardiologist perspective from an emerging country. However, it's not only my voice, it's the unheard voice of a country that was already deeply wounded when pandemic came and even hit the hardest. After only 4 months from graduation from the interventional fellowship program, ranking the first among the graduates, I was overwhelmed and happily attending Cardio Egypt 2020 for the first time in my career as a faculty, as international contributor to this conference. There, on 24th of February 2020, we learned that Iraq declared the first case of COVID-19. It's then we knew that we have a big humanitarian tragedy in front of us. We know that we have really damaged infrastructure. We have collapsed healthcare system. We have limited resources with really poor medical services because of the limited resources. We asked ourselves how hard this pandemic will hit us, and painfully the days really answered us. We have, regarding the medical and cardiac services, we have significant decline in all the procedures, whether the elective or the emergency, including the primary PCI, because the patients were facing difficulty in reaching to the hospital. We have difficulty, especially I'm an early career interventional cardiologist, along with my fellows in training. We have difficulty in adaptation of the full equipment and doing the procedures with full equipment, the sanitation. We have shortage in the PPE equipment because of the limited resources. Regarding the family and social life of our doctors, the doctors were actually consumed physically and emotionally, especially the females. Many of them were mothers. They were deprived from contacting their children, from contacting their parents, because they were afraid to transmit the disease to them, or they were really engaged within the duties within the hospitals. Also, they had to do extra work regarding educating their children, regarding doing the family care, the child care. So they were really struggling there. Regarding our patients, many of our patients are from very poor socioeconomic status. When they overcome all the barriers to reach to us, to the centers, then they are facing another barrier that we prescribe, for example, the drugs for them, but our facilities had limited resources and we can't provide them with the drugs. Then they are very poor and they can't afford the cost of these drugs from outside. So we were running in a vicious cycle. I'm doing my best, but still I can't help my patients. And the pandemic hit them economically more because many of them became unemployed, many of them don't have financial support. Regarding the other aspect, which is the career and the training, actually, because of the decline and dramatic decline in the procedures, we felt that we are not escalating as we wanted to escalate during the first year after graduation. Because I'm almost the only female interventional cardiologist in my country, I don't have role model female cardiologists to contact with or to see them, to seek their experience. I also was deprived from attending international workshops, international conferences, to see other role models out there so I can at least make use of their experience, their perspectives, and this was a big problem with me. The other barrier is traveling. One of the ways I relied on to upgrade my skills was traveling to Al Nasriya Heart Center, which is a large volume center that located about in an area at Al Nasriya Dhiqar. It's about 6 hours from my locality. But because of the demonstration, the strike and the popular strike and the revolution that occurred in my country, and along with the pandemic, this deprived me from going to this area. And still, I felt that I was halted in progress from the professional point of view. However, as Martin Luther King said that today, our very survival depends on our ability to stay awake, to adjust to new ideas, to remain vigilant, and to face the challenge of change. We still learned so many lessons during this pandemic that will qualify us to face every barrier and to face the future problems and challenges. We identified the fragile points in our healthcare system. We knew that we have to prioritize our medical services, especially in low resources country like Iraq. We knew that we have to balance the life with the work. We have to stop the personal sacrifice for the professional progress, because if we did that, then we will have more potential. We knew that the virtual science is crucial. It's a curving point in our career. For me, as being from an emerging country with a remarkable visa obstacles, with no funding, no institutional educational grants or travel grants, I would never imagine to reach a highly impactful conferences. While this year, because of the virtual science, I had the opportunity to participate with researchers in the ACC, in the SKY, in the TC2 Connect, in the HFSA, in the Heart Failure Association HFA discoveries. So it was a very big opportunity for me. For me, it was a miracle, it was a gift. We need to adapt and reshape the cardiology fellowship program curriculum by virtual meetings, simulation training. We have to maintain the integrity, the scientific integrity, and the equal opportunities according to the pandemic needs. Telemedicine, despite we are in Iraq, despite we have limited resources, it is still bridge gaps in our healthcare system. It is still was very helpful. We used it and it was very helpful for our patients. Still, we have the traditional and custom problem of that the male patient can't call the female doctor and so on. But if we increase the recruitment of female doctors, female clinical pharmacists, female nurses within our teams, then we can overcome this traditional and customs problem. Also, the social media is crucial in our career. For me, actually, it's very recent that I started to use the social media after attending one of the sessions of the TCT Connect. For the first time in my life, I knew how many female interventional cardiologists are there. In the Twitter, they were very supportive. They helped me. They exchange ideas, cases. I even started research opportunities with them. So all that were lessons and privilege from this pandemic. COVID-19 pandemic hit hardly the world. But if we keep remembering that we are all in this together, regardless our countries, regardless our ethnicity, our color, our race, regardless everything, just keeping in mind that we are in this as humans, then we can collaborate and respond as we should do. And we can help each other, help our patients, and then, only then, we will survive. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you, Zainab, for the great presentation. I would now like to ask Dr. Zuhlke if she can ask you a question about your essay.
Thank you very much, Sabida. Zainab, that was an absolutely inspirational presentation and a wonderful essay to read. And I must say, as I read it, coming from South Africa, where we also, and the rest of our continent, have the issues of fragile health systems and infrastructure, that really the social infrastructure that was failing in many ways. To read about what you had experienced and to hear about it from you, really incredibly thought-provoking, inspirational, and really I want to thank you for your submission and for your presentation. I want to pick up on two things. One is that you talked about not meeting other role models when you've traveled. And I just want to say that after this presentation, you have become the role model that so many people will look up to. It really shows what you are capable of, what you are able to give to your community and to your discipline. And I think it's really important for all of you that that are on this essay competition to remind yourselves that you have become role models to all of us listening. And then the final thing that you talked about in your essay was not being alone anymore. And again, you've summed it up so beautifully at the end of your presentation, how we are all in this together. And I think that's been one of the unique opportunities during this time. my question remains around personal resilience and personal support. I mean, if I read through all the things you've done, your travels, you know, the difficulties with virtual telehealth, all of those things, and I'm left wondering, how did you manage? How are you still so optimistic? How are you so forward thinking and enthusiastic? And what were your particular areas of personal support and strength? And how can we pass it on to our other younger members, particularly women listening to this webinar this evening?
Thank you for your talk and for your question. Actually, the first thing that helps me to keep move on is my family. They are very supportive. You know, in Iraq, there are the problem of the traditions and customs. Even sometimes there are families that forbid female from being at night at the hospital. This was a very big problem for many of my colleague doctors. But I have a very supportive family that they are accepting that I stay at the hospitals, I travel alone for professional upgrading. The other thing is, I think, which is one of the most important thing, is the mentorship. I really had a great mentor who really represent, he is a cardiologist, a male cardiologist, really represent what's the meaning of he for she. He is Professor Hassan Farhan, who is the head of the Iraqi Council of Cardiology. His mentorship helped me to and opened the way in front of me. He told me that we have to seek the global recognition. We have to contact others. If there is no female interventional cardiologists in Iraq, this doesn't mean that there are no interventional cardiologists global-wise. You have to contact them, you have to exchange ideas and experiences from them, and then you have to upgrade yourself even in this locality. Iraq actually is in must need of female interventional cardiologists. We have traditions. You know, some females are deprived from echo because they don't have a female cardiologist to do echo for them. Their husbands and their families, their father, their brother are forbidding them from being examined by a male doctor. This is a bigger problem here. So they need us. When I modestly started, but I'm trying to push other doctors with me. For the first time after decades, a female interventional cardiologist became in Iraq, and now I'm starting to recruit others. The first one, we succeed in recruiting her. She's in the first year now, and the other one is the final year medicine. Also, she is coming here. The support from the mentors, from many of the seniors, the interventional cardiologists, I think is one of the best things that I have. Also, recently, the support from the other women in cardiology. When I engaged in Twitter and I see how they are talking and how they are modest and trying to support us, even we have modest experience in research. They are telling us everything and trying to teach us many things. I think this is a big opportunity. So with social media, I think really there is no border for science. Even if I'm from a country like this, even with the modest resources, I hope I'm going to do something for my country.
Thank you so much, Zainab. It was a real pleasure to get to know you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zainab. And thank you to all the presenters and the judges.
Can I think I'm so inspired by Zainab, Dr. Zainab. You are actually treading a path from the front, something which the country has not happened to the country. An interventional cardiologist, a lady, and you are actually getting into not just the fact that you just talked about, but even looking after COVID patients. Did you have challenges? And let me ask you this, that even social media in many times is not considered, how should we say, is not considered very good amongst many cultures, and ladies participating in social media. Is that a problem for you? How did you overcome that? Because you're truly a path breaker, and I'm sure you're an inspiration to a lot of women who will take up being doctors and cardiologists in such countries. My hats off. I'm inspired by what you're doing. So just tell me a bit more about this.
Okay, you mean that is the social media became a barrier in our culture?
Yeah, social media is not considered, yes, for ladies to be a part of social media, yes, groups is not considered good in many cultures, including yours, I guess.
Yes, actually in Iraq, for many families, even my family actually are very conservative family, but still regarding science, they are very supportive. The social media and like Facebook and the Twitter, having pictures or videos online and such like that are actually are not recommended and sometimes even forbidden. But I have to admit, I'm keeping my social relationship and my family relationship, friend relationship, usually in other ways. In the social media, I started to use it only for contacting, networking with scientists and researchers, cardiologists. So that's why I'm calling it research and science media. Sure. Yes, but regarding social life, yes, I'm following the traditions of my family. I'm keeping my social. I have a very active social life and very great friends, but I'm keeping the bridges between me and them in our private way and in our traditional way. I'm taking the social media from the scientific point of view, and this is okay. This is okay even with the most conservative families and traditional families. It's okay to upgrade our knowledge and our career. They are not against that. But certain things, yes, we are restricted in our traditions, right?
Dr. Zainab, keep it up. We really have a lot of respect for you. It's tremendous knowing you. I'm happy to be a judge on this, on this forum. I've come to know some tremendous people who will be path breakers in times to come. You're treading much more difficult paths than we did.
These words really means a lot to me. Thank you very much. Thanks for the support.
Thank you so much to all our presenters. You have no idea how much you've inspired each and every one of us. Be it Nandita talking about choosing cardiology, be it Sheila telling us about her struggles and her experiences as a global health educator, be it Saima talking to us about her parenthood journey during COVID-19, Lucia, even in spite of her health struggles, being such a strong contributor to cardiology and the heart failure specialty, and you with your struggle in Iraq, Zainab. Each one of you has left us with something today. We cannot express in words how thankful we are to our judges who've taken time out of their busy schedules and been here for us, for all the women in cardiology who look up to each and every one of you. Thank you. So there is immense value in owning our experiences, in sharing our voices, in building a community. We are grateful to each one of you for sharing with us your personal stories, and with that, your truth.